Data 1.9. So to showcase some of the things that we're doing in data contracts that will be available, I'm going to have Pere come on and talk about data contracts. So thank you, Pere.
Awesome. Thank you, folks. Thanks for the time. Thank you for joining. An awesome presentation, Eamon. It's always great to see all of these implementations. So let's jump now into the data contracts world. But before that, let's try to lay a bit the foundations. And there's a scary truth that is that actually your data platform is complex, right? So if we take a look into kind of this simple toy example, I'm sure that most of you are going to have more complicated things than that. But it's very easy in a smaller environment already to start saying, okay, my first step is going to be pulling some metadata, in this case, some data from certain APIs that will go through streaming pipelines and processes via Kafka. I'm going to lay those data in an S3 bucket. Then I'm going to start creating external tables into my warehouse. I will keep playing with those tables, creating the DIMs, the facts, whatever it is that we need in order to start curating these data models so that they can then jump into, in this case, Power BI, the dashboard data models that other business analysts and whatnot would be creating directly onto the visualization tools up until this is really capable of pulling out on the screen certain KPIs on how the business is going. So as you can see, there's a lot of steps in there, even in this simple example, and there's many different teams that are involved here. So we would be starting with whatever the backend team is preparing via the APIs and the events and the topics. Then the data team comes into play. Okay, how do we normalize and organize all of this data in the right way so that the business people and the ops people can come and jump and do their work with this mentality about how is this our business behaving, how can we make sure that we pull the threads into picking up the right metrics and sharing the right insights to make sure that we close the loop, get back to the backend team and add the right decisions there. So through all of this process, there's assumptions, right? There's many things that while this data is moving, at some point we need to say, okay, I'm going to assume that this data is going to be here every day, or that this column is going to exist, or that 2 years from now, I'm also still going to be able to use a certain table or to follow up with a certain computation of my KPIs. And here is where things start to get tricky, because we might end up with some horror stories. And here I just have kind of a few examples, at least the ones that I've lived in the past, but I'm sure that most of them are also going to be resonating with you when you wake up in the morning, you are part of the data platform team, and then your pipelines start to fail. You go to Slack, you go to Teams and say, hey, why did we remove this column? Because now all of my downstream dependencies are starting to fail. And we might end up hearing some of these responses, the typical, oh, why were you using this? Because actually this column was only for internal computations. If you want to compute whatever metric, hey, instead you should be using another thing. Or people directly saying, hey, actually it was deprecated. Instead of customer ID, now it's called ID customer because we are normalizing some names. Or, I actually thought no one was using it. I was checking the code and I did not find any reference to it. So basically, you need to eat the situation. You have to update all of your downstream pipelines, all of the models. If you are lucky, it's just going to be a replace all in the IDE. But in a more complex scenario, you might need to actually figure another way to get the same data in or to patch the computations that you were doing. Another scenario would be you were relying on certain columns to compute some metrics, to compute some KPIs, and then you wake up, you're a business analyst, you start to look at your dashboard, and there's plummeting numbers. Maybe you're computing revenue and you're trying to figure out what is going on this week, that we are actually selling 50% less than last week. You start crunching the numbers and see that some values in one of the columns that you're using are actually missing. They are empty. So you say, hey, should this be not null? I was actually using that. And I'm not proud of this, but one of the answers that I typically gave is, hey, just talk to bucket. I'm moving the data here. If you want to understand what's going on, please go figure out what happened in the source system. Or you might get also an answer from the business people saying, hey, actually the logic of the application changed. So you might have empty records here if specific case comes into play, or just a process that we are deprecating. But in the end, the result is going to be similar as the first story. Your dashboards are going to be wonky. Your KPIs are not going to match. You need to just sit down, clear your agenda, pick up the phone and start talking to business to figure out what are the next steps going to be. But this is not only about metadata or about the data itself. It's also about having a bit of trust into who is going to take care of the origins of your data, right? If you are working with a super important dashboard and actually your information source starts behaving a bit weird, you need to be able to raise the hand and say, hey, I see that there has been some issues with the pipeline that's feeding the table that's been failing for a full week. Who's going to be taking care of that? And you might get answers such as, oh, this team is now actually part of another team, or the person that was taking care of that process left the company, so now we don't really know how to work with that. Or maybe in the future we get, oh, now this team is actually AI, so you need to ask someone else. But the result is, again, the same. You have a critical data product that is built on top of something that no one owns. So congratulations, now you inherited a new pipeline that you need to support, you need to pull the thread, you need to figure out how this works in order to really make sure that you can keep delivering the insights and the results that you have to deliver. And in these complex scenarios, and not complex only about the data itself, but about the internal processes, the different teams, the different user personas that are daily interacting with data in the organization, that's why we need data contracts, which basically are a way to keep the data consumers and the data producers properly aligned. It's about making sure that people sit down together in the same room or via Zoom, and then they formalize an agreement about, okay, I want to understand how you need to use that piece of data, and then we are going to reach an agreement. We're going to put down a list of bullet points on how this piece of data that you're going to use should behave so that your use case can be safe in time. Now, what we've seen like being used in the market and being used by other companies is that, first of all, contracts are not always enforced, or they are not always validated. It's like, okay, we sat down last year with the people from business, with the people from backend, and then we created a Confluence page. That's great, but Confluence page is not going to go and make sure that the rules that you put in the game are actually going to be enforced. So this is actually the same as having a door with a lock painted into it. It gives you a sense of security, but anyone can go and can open it. So the same would happen with data contracts that are really not enforceable. You are putting all the work, you are laying all of the foundations, but you actually have no assurances whatsoever that this contract is going to be valid through time. And the other case that we have been also by taking a look at other platforms and how other organizations are actually implementing data contracts is that they tend to end up being too technical in nature. So people go, they prepare some YAMLs, they push the YAML somewhere, and okay, that's our data contract. But as we were saying, there's not only the complexity of data, there's also the complexity of people that are actually working and playing with the data. And within this context, we're going to have technical users, data engineers, software engineers, data scientists. Perfect. They love YAML. We love YAML. We go, we play with the APIs, we play with CLIs, we play with whatever it is that we need to play in order to make sure that these data contracts are living and hosted somewhere. But what happens with the rest of non-technical people that also are using this data, that also should be part of this collaboration, that should be part of this conversation, so that in the end we can say, yeah, we built a beautiful data asset together because it's following all of these rules. It's making sure that we can check the boxes of all of these use cases. So in the end, data is collaboration, and we need to find a way to actually break these barriers, right? We don't want data contracts to be hidden behind their technical nature. We want to make sure that we are hosting this collaborative environment where anyone can copy, can chip in, and in the end, we reach into some place where we all have peace of mind that we are not going to jump into the horror stories that we were seeing before. And this is where our implementation of data contracts come in. So the first foundational idea is that data contracts are following the same fundamentals as any other entity that we have in OpenMetadata. So in the last release, we already put out the specification and the APIs for the data contract, which is great because we are not here to force any kind of, let's say, interaction or any kind of user experience to anyone. You are a technical person, perfect. You can dump the YAML, you can push it, you can play with the API, you can create absolutely anything that you need with this automation nature that it's the foundation of open metadata. And that's actually what Eamon was showing to us before on how he was able to bridge all of this gap around the scripting, around the scheduling, all of this process through Airflow. So this is something that you are also going to be able to do with the data contracts. But again, we want to empower users. We want to democratize this alignment. We want to make sure that people can work together, that they can collaborate into really creating these data contracts that are going to properly solve the different use cases across the organization, across the different users' personas. So in order to make this happen, we are providing a full UI support so that we can get verifications and validations on the schemas, right? This story about, oh, my column disappeared. We can also add these checks on the data quality of the data, but oh, this column should not be null, these values should be unique. So that's also part of the data contract. And finally, about these semantics of the data, about these kind of checks on the metadata itself, about, hey, team, we need to make sure that the data that we are using is properly owned by someone. I really need to have this assurance that there's going to be anyone in any other part in the organization that it's going to make sure that the assets that we're using are going to be behaving properly. Because if we are going to be playing with an asset that is not owned, that really opens a danger zone for us. And what is also interesting in this case is that, you know that we have actually in Open Metadata our in-house built profiling and data quality support. And this data quality support has been there for years already. So in this case, our implementation of data contracts do not force you to go ahead, jump into other tools and basically prepare the ingredients somewhere else. You can just follow the natural flow of the UI, start adding the data quality tests that you need directly from there, and start enforcing how these assets should behave. And the second part, which we were talking about the enforcement, right? So we really need to make sure that these data contracts are validated. We really need to make sure that we have this piece of heart when we start creating this alignment and these agreements with the rest of the people. So it's not only about having these contract validations scheduled, which there's an application already out that it's going to be taking care of that. It's also bridging this gap again into the observability world with a built-in alerting system so that you can just take a look at your Slack, at your email, at Teams in the morning and figure out if something changed in your data contracts, if you need to jump and open a conversation with someone else, because that might mean trouble in the data products that you are creating on top. So that being said, let's take a look at how, there we go. and how this flow is going to look from the UI. So I have here my orders table, and as you can see, I have on the navigation bar there my contract tab. So I'm going to click in there and I'm going to start creating some data contracts. The first thing that this is going to ask me is, let's give a title. So orders data contract. I'm going to put customer team as the owner of this contract. We had a nice alignment here. We can put better description. Now I'm going to jump into the schema, and here I'm actually going to see all of the columns that are already available in my table, which means that, hey, maybe some of them can change. Maybe some of these columns, they are for internal use. That's the first excuse that we got when we were talking about the column disappearing horror story, because maybe the people that are preparing, the teams that are giving me this asset, they can assure me that, okay, the order ID, the order date, and the status are going to be there, but the rest of the columns, maybe they change because of XYZ. That's completely fine. Data evolves, processes evolve, organizations evolve. That's great. We just need to be able to have certain guardrails. We need to be able to plan around that data evolution so that we are not going to have unwanted surprises in the future. So in this case, it's fine. We're just going to flag these 4 columns on. Those are always going to be there for us. The next check that we can add here is in terms of this semantics. This is what we were talking about. Hey, it's not only about validating the data, it's also about up to some sorts validating the metadata itself. So I can come and I can say owners is set. This is going to be the rule that I'm creating here, because without ownership, we are in danger zone. And I have rules that I can apply in the owners, in the description, tags, in a few different places of our assets, which we will keep expanding as well. But for now, let's keep it simple. I'm going to say that owners needs to be set. I'm going to save that rule. If I wanted, I could keep adding more rules until I'm happy with it. Maybe I also want to validate that the domain is there or that the description is full, some things like that. And finally, I can also come here and start adding data quality tests as part of this data contract. As you can see, those data quality tests were already there. Someone already came, creating certain quality tests, started putting some validations of the data, and then the same discussion about the schema can be applied into the quality side. Maybe there's some validations that are quote-unquote good to have, but that they are really not going to break my contract in case that something changes. So I can go ahead, I can start selecting few of these data quality tests, but also what I can do is directly from the UI start adding new tests here, and this bridges beautifully with this new UX that the OpenMetadata team prepared here for making it even easier, smoothing a bit more how we are creating the test cases. So now I can come here. I'm actually going to force a test to fail. So I'm just going to say that this table should have a gazillion columns. Oops, let me move that out. And now I'm also going to select here my row count. And with that, I'm going to save my data contract. And as you can see, I have it here with, let's say, a summary of what it is that we added, with the descriptions, with the schemas, with the tests that were already passing, which is great. I already have some part of the work done, but since I just created it, I want to go ahead and run it. I really want to validate the pieces that I added here into my contract. And as you can see, this already failed. The moment that I'm running this is running some checks internally in the backend about the shape of the table, basically the schema that we have, as well as the semantics of the table. So this is already failing because it's saying that 1 failed out of 1 semantic checks because the owners are actually not set. If I want to come and I want to fix this out, I'm going to come here at customer team. Now I can run this again. I'm going to refresh, and perfect. Now the semantics are working properly. Now, as you can see, the contract is still not finished. The validation is still running because, if you remember, we were adding this data quality test from here. So the data quality test execution is going to be powered by the existing data quality test modules. So this might take a couple of extra minutes to run because it needs to pick up the test suite, it needs to start executing all of these queries against the asset. But in order for us to not have to wait here, I have this other table where I already forced some of these data quality tests to fail, and I can see here that, okay, there's some tests that are passing, but actually the customer rows is not behaving as it should. So as you can see, a super comfortable way directly from the UI with this end-to-end flow where we can check the schema of our table, the data quality of our table, as well as this more metadata and business semantics of what we expect to see, in this case, in the customers or in the orders table. This would be what we have built up until now. So the next steps that we are going to be closing in the next release is that we're going to add this UI support for other asset types. Now you can find the data contracts for tables, and we are going to keep expanding these validations for other assets as well. We want to also give you the chance to add your own custom properties for these data contracts because we understand that different organizations have their own specific needs. And finally, we are going to be adding different tabs in there about other pieces of information that we believe that are important for them to be first level citizens for a data contract, which are the security, the SLAs, and the terms of use of our data.
Let's take a little brief moment to address some of the questions that are coming through the community. So is this feature available in OpenMetadata and Collate? It is available in both, that is open source as well as our Collate. The first version is pretty much the same in both the iterations. We want to make sure, again, from a very beginning, OpenMetadata is set to build out metadata standards, and we want to make the data contracts as the standard that is applicable to everyone, right? So now you have all the data in OpenMetadata. Now you have all the personas in OpenMetadata. You can build the contracts together. If your favorite is YAML, you can use YAML. If your favorite is using the UI, use the UI. And the best thing out of all of these things is the data contract is living contract. It's not just written in and stored somewhere. It's actually being functioning. It's checking while you're changing it. Is the data quality test that you added as part of the contract is live or not? Is the semantic rules are live or not? And more importantly, from the standard perspective, I posted a GitHub issue. We shared that in our Slack channel as well. We will be building a data contract page in the docs to clear out any of these questions. But our specifications, in my opinion, is much more wider, covers a lot more. That's because OpenMetadata has all the ingredients, which is from metadata checks to data quality checks to semantic understanding. You have approval workflows right within the open source version. That gave us the opportunity to build a data contract that can bring your technical and non-technical personas come together and build this data contract together, and that actually living and functioning tests. So that's data contracts. Pere, if you want to continue on to the next ones.
Awesome, thanks. I'm going to be quick on this part, Harsha, to not steal too much of your time. So the second big piece that we built here on the 1.9 release are the data asset rules. So when we started building in OpenMetadata all of the features around domains and data products, we did it with a vision of supporting data mesh, which is basically this process or this thought around, okay, how can we organize the different data consumers and data producers into the organization in a way that they can independently build pieces of data that can be shared and used across the organization in a transparent and documented and independent way. Now, what we've seen, however, when getting in touch with more both open source users as well as Collate customers, is that organizations, they want more flexibility. There's people that they bought in the different concepts about, oh, we love how domains help us organize our data, how data products help us really highlight which pieces are safe to be used, but they don't really want all of the strict definitions that come together with a data mesh approach. So maybe people want to say, hey, actually an asset or a glossary term can be part of multiple domains. Or maybe I want to make sure that I'm only allowing a data asset to be part of a single data product instead of multiple data products. So after all of these conversations, our goal is to figure out, as this standard metadata management platform for all of the organization out there, is okay, how can we actually bring these needs of flexibility that the organizations need in terms of these governance rules and these governance guardrails. And in order to achieve that, we have these in preferences and data asset rules. We are bringing out, at least for now, these 4 built-in rules so that we can be more flexible around what a user can expect out of their metadata. So instead of having some strict validations into the backend, now these are actually going to have this extra flexibility layer where you can actually enable or disable some of these rules depending on what it is that makes the most sense for your organization. And what is important here is that these rules are directly baked into the APIs. So this is a bit different from the data contracts, because as you saw in the data contracts, I can create something that breaks the contract, and that's great. Okay, I'll get the alert, we'll figure it out. But if you're actually enabling some of these rules, I'm not going to be able to make some changes into my data that actually go and break the rules. So in this case, as you can see, for example, one of the rules here is that multiple domains by default, they are not allowed. So if I come into my orders table, I can add 1 domain, perfect, that works. And if I come and if I try to add 2 domains, this is actually breaking the rule, validation failed, the entity is not satisfying the rule. If I'm actually interested in my orders table to be able to have multiple domains, or not only the orders table, but any entity in OpenMetadata, I can disable the rule, go back into my table, and now I can come and I can make these changes. So this is a really, really, really powerful feature that it's baked into the very foundation of the backend, into the APIs themselves. So feel free to take it for a spin. Let us know what are your thoughts. If there's any other rule, other validations that you think that makes sense also to add into the platform, please do get in touch with us so that we can keep releasing bit by bit all of these pieces to make sure that in your organization you can follow the steps that make sense for you. And with that being said, thank you, folks, and I'm going to pass the baton to Harsha.
All right, I think we have a lot of questions. Pere, why don't you answer on the chat? I think I'll just show one thing. I'm sure everyone love data contracts. We'll either keep the discussions on that, but we have a lot of things coming in. Just a second, let me share my screen. All right, if you want to learn more about data contracts, we have all the JSON schema and the discussions here. We can continue to have conversations here. If you think we need to add more about our specifications, what you see in your productions, what you see in the specification that we are lacking, we'd love to get feedback, right? We want this data contracts to work for you. And I'm hoping you guys take this, run it in production, give us feedback, and hopefully next month or so, you can come and talk to us in the community meetup about how you implement data contracts using OpenMetadata. That will be awesome.